Welcome to the deep dive, from policy to the fine print. Today we unpack Chapter 4, the treaty, and how its clauses made economic recovery impossible.
In our last deep dive, we really got into the psychology of the leaders, didn't we? Clemenceau, Wilson, Lloyd George. It was this political and psychological failure.
Right, it's all about their ambitions, their illusions, the pressures from back home, and we saw how that created a vacuum where, economic reality just couldn't get a word in.
Exactly. And today we're making the transition from the abstract analysis of character and motive to the hard text, the tangible, destructive legal framework they ended up creating.
And that framework is Chapter 4.
Yeah.
This is where it all gets put down on paper, where the political tragedy becomes, well, legally binding economic ruin.
And we have to start with the very foundation, don't we? The broken promise.
We do.
Germany puts down its arms in November 1918. But not because of an unconditional military defeat in the field. It was based on an explicit assumption, a very explicit one. The assumption that the final peace would be built on President Wilson's own principles. They were expecting a settlement of, and this is the quote, justice and magnanimity.
That's a critical piece of context. Germany essentially disarmed itself, voluntarily, banking on the promise of a rational, constructive peace, something that would offer a real, fair hope for restoration.
But that's not what happened in the final text. Not at all. The Allies secured Germany's unconditional surrender, yes, but they also made sure to grant themselves, quote, unrestricted power to safeguard and enforce the details of the peace.
So they promised fairness to get the surrender and then wrote themselves a blank check to do whatever they wanted afterwards.
It's the ultimate bait and switch. You had this lofty, incredibly ambitious spirit of the 14 points. It was supposed to be a wise and magnanimous program for the entire world.
And it just got lost.
Completely lost. Lost in the morass of terrorists, as Keynes puts it. The political demands, the need for revenge, it just eclipsed any of that initial idealism. And that leads us straight to the core problem in this chapter.
The central conflict.
The devastating irony of it all. The flaw that makes the whole treaty self-defeating from an economic standpoint is this. The document was drafted to do two things that are fundamentally incompatible. You just can't do them at the same time.
Okay, what are they?
On one hand, the treaty was designed to punish Germany, to systematically dismantle its entire industrial structure, to strip it of the very things it needed to create wealth.
Cripple them.
Cripple them, exactly. And on the other hand, it insisted on demanding massive, ongoing, long-term payments through reparations.
How can you create a debtor and then immediately destroy their income stream? I mean, it goes beyond punitive. It's just economically illiterate.
That's the word for it.
They wanted Germany weak enough to never be a threat again, but somehow rich enough to pay for the entire Allied war effort.
That is the contradiction right there. It's where the political desire for revenge just steamrolls any kind of economic logic. The goal was to make Germany poor, weak, and dependent, while simultaneously demanding she be the most productive nation in Europe for a generation. It's an impossible equation.
It is. It's a decision based on what Keynes calls sovereign expediency, overriding economic truth. And that's what guaranteed the treaty's failure from the very start. So I think we need to look at exactly how they engineered this step by step.
Right, let's get into the mechanics of the destruction, starting with the physical changes. The amputation of the industrial machine.
Yes, the territorial and resource losses.
So let's look at the map first. The loss of territory and population. This wasn't just about redrawing borders. It fundamentally changed Germany's whole economic identity.
It did. You have to remember what pre-war Germany was. It was a vast, highly specialized industrial machine. But, and this is crucial, it was dependent on the outside world. It needed imports and trade to feed its growing population.
It wasn't self-sufficient.
Not at all. It was a really densely populated, complex industrial state. Keynes points out that it needed foreign trade, it needed shipping, and it needed imported raw materials to support something like 15 million of its people.
15 million who couldn't be fed by domestic agriculture alone. Exactly. The whole economy was specialized to thrive through global commerce.
So when you start stripping away territory, you're not just taking land. You're taking a productive workforce, you're taking valuable farmland, and I assume you're taking the industrial resources that powered the whole thing.
And that's where the treaty strikes. It goes right for the heart of what had fueled Germany's incredible growth since 1871. It targeted the geographic concentration of its industry.
Which is all about the synergy between two things.
Coal and iron. That combination was Germany's economic Achilles heel, and the Allies just hammered it relentlessly.
Okay, so let's break down that attack. It seems to come in a few critical phases, all related to coal and iron. Where do we start?
Let's start with the immediate and permanent loss of iron ore. That comes with Alsace-Lorraine.
Which was reacquired by France.
Right. And with it, Germany lost these absolutely crucial iron ore resources that had been integral to its steel industry. And Keynes is very clear here. The French motive wasn't just about historical sentiment.
It was economic.
It was explicitly about securing those resources to boost the industrial production of Lorraine. It was about gaining a long-term industrial advantage over their biggest competitor.
Okay, so that's one major resource stream compromise.
Yeah.
But you said the real collapse comes with the coal losses. This is where it gets truly devastating.
This is where Germany's energy supply is systematically dismantled. There are three distinct major hits to their coal capacity. The first is the Saar Basin.
The Saar.
The Saar was, you could say, a masterpiece of immediate confiscation. The coal mines there were ceded to France in, and the language is important, full and absolute possession, unencumbered and free from all debts and charges of any kind.
And this was framed as compensation for the French coal mines destroyed during the war.
Correct.
But hold on, a lot of people remember the Saar was administered by the League of Nations for 15 years, right?
Yeah.
Before they had a vote. That sounds temporary.
It sounds temporary, but you're stressing that the mines themselves were ceded? Absolutely. That is the crucial legal detail that often gets missed. The political administration of the territory, yes, that was the League's job for 15 years. But the ownership of the vast coal reserves under the ground, the mines themselves, that was transferred to France. Immediately and permanently.
So France got outright, total ownership of this massive energy source from day one.
From day one. It severely compromised German access to the fundamental driver of its entire industry. The League was just supervising the government, not the economic asset.
Wow. Okay, so that's the Saar. And then further east, you have Upper Silesia. You call this the coal heartland.
It was enormous, a truly critical industrial district. It had one of Germany's major, most productive coal fields. We're talking about a massive chunk of their output.
How much?
About 23% of the total German output of hard coal.
A quarter of their coal, just gone.
Well, its fate was subject to a plebiscite, a vote. But the effective removal, or even just the potential removal of this resource, created devastating uncertainty. It immediately stripped Germany of a huge segment of its active industrial capacity.
So we've got the loss of Alsace-Lorraine and its iron, the permanent loss of the Saar coal mines, and the very likely loss of Upper Silesia. Let's try to, put a number on this. What was the cumulative coal deficit just from losing these territories?
The numbers are, they're staggering. The reduction in coal production, just from losing those three territories, amounted to 60,800,000 tons a year.
60 million tons. That's not a deficit. That's an industrial hemorrhage.
It is. And to put that in perspective, pre-war domestic consumption in Germany was around 139 million tons. After losing all that territory, the remaining production capacity was estimated at only 118 million tons.
So they were already short. They were nearly 20 million tons in the hole before they even started talking about reparations payments.
Exactly. They were already in a deficit just to run their own country. But of course, the pain didn't stop with losing territory. The treaty then layered on top of that shrinking supply a new burden.
The compulsory delivery.
Yes. They had to pay reparations in coal from the desperately limited supply they had left.
That was the second fatal blow.
It was. Germany was mandated to deliver huge, fixed amounts of coal every year to France, Belgium, Italy, and Luxembourg for up to 10 years.
How much are we talking about?
In the first 5 years alone, it was 20 million tons a year. A staggering demand. So you take 60 million tons of capacity away, and then you demand another 20 million on top of that from what's left.
Okay, this is it's an operational impossibility.
Yeah.
If the remaining capacity is 118 million tons, but they need 139 million for themselves, they're already 21 million short.
Right.
Then you demand another 20 million for the Allies on top of that. Now they're over 40 million tons in deficit. And that deficit has to come out of the basic needs of their remaining industries, their homes, their railways.
That is Keynes's analytical point, precisely. The combination of losing the territory plus the compulsory deliveries rendered the coal supply for German industry, quote, technically impossible. The whole thing would just grind to a halt.
And this wasn't happening in a vacuum. The rest of Europe needed coal too.
Of course. When Herbert Hoover did the math, he noted that the total coal output of Europe had already fallen by a third because of the war. So pulling this much out of Germany's economy made the problem even worse for the entire continent.
The implication seems clear. The demands about iron and coal. It just meant the German economy had to bow to political revenge, not economic truth.
It's the definition of setting a debtor up for failure. You remove the means of production, the coal, the iron, the ability to create wealth, and then you demand a colossal payment be made with that wealth that no longer exists.
How are steel mills supposed to run? How do trains move? How do you make the goods you need to export to pay for anything if the very foundation of energy and raw material has been ripped out from under you?
It creates a complete industrial domino effect. No coal, no steel, a crippled railway system. Crippled infrastructure means you can't even move the few resources you have left.
So that's the destruction of the fixed assets, the physical plant of
Mhm.
Germany. But the treaty didn't stop there. It then went after Germany's working capital, its ability to even participate in the global market.
That's right. And that's where we move into the systematic confiscation of movable assets. And it starts with a truly devastating blow to Germany's global commerce: the complete destruction of its merchant marine.
The entire German mercantile marine was, as Keynes says, swept from the seas. And this isn't just about losing ships. This is a catastrophic operational loss for a trading nation.
It was a fatal blow to their commercial autonomy. Germany was deprived of its entire fleet. And we're not just talking about military vessels, we're talking commercial ships, the very arteries of its global trade.
So this destroyed their self-sufficiency.
Completely. It destroyed their ability to navigate on their own terms, and crucially, it deprived them of the ability to earn the foreign currency they needed to buy essential goods.
Like food and raw materials.
Especially food. Remember, Germany needed foreign trade to feed 15 million people. Without your own ships to move goods, or to earn money by carrying other nations' goods, how do you generate the cash to pay for those vital food imports?
And it gets worse. Not only did they lose every single ship they had, including ones that were still being built.
They were then forced into a mandatory shipbuilding program for the victors.
That's incredible.
It is. Germany was required to build up to 200,000 tons of new ships every year for 5 years and just hand them over to the Allies.
And I assume the value was credited against the reparation bill.
Supposedly, yes. But the immediate effect was that it turned German shipbuilding, a key industry, into a mandatory production line for their former enemies. It completely stalled their own ability to recover commercially.
So losing the fleet and being forced to build ships for others, that alone is a fatal blow to their financial capacity, even before the final reparation number is set.
It guaranteed that if Germany needed to import anything, they had to use Allied or neutral shipping. And that meant paying huge freight rates in the very foreign currency they were so desperate to save. It was just a massive, continuous transfer of wealth to Allied shipping companies.
Okay, so the asset stripping goes from ships to government property and colonies. And this seems to be another case where the Allies took valuable assets but refused to credit them against the debt.
Precisely. Germany ceded all rights to its overseas colonies. But on top of that, any government property, we're talking railways, post offices, infrastructure, in the territories they lost, like Alsace-Lorraine, or the land ceded to Poland, was forfeited.
Forfeited without a single penny credited toward reparations.
Zero credit. These assets had significant tangible value, but they were just taken off the books as spoils of war. No offset against the massive financial sums that were coming down the pike.
But the part that truly shocked Keynes, the part he saw as most destructive to, international stability, was the expropriation of private German property.
This is where the treaty crosses a line that had, for the most part, been respected in modern warfare for a couple of centuries.
What was the clause?
The Allied powers reserved the right to retain and liquidate all property, rights, and interests belonging to German nationals or companies anywhere within former German colonies or any Allied country.
You mean everything, like private bank accounts, real estate, shares in a company?
Absolutely everything, globally. This included huge investments German citizens had in Allied and even neutral countries. We're talking about stakes in Russian railways, Austrian factories, Turkish businesses.
What kind of value are we talking about?
It's hard to be precise, but Keynes estimated that the pre-war value of these targeted investments could have been upwards of £500 million sterling, a colossal sum. Even if the war reduced their value, they were still confiscated. It was a direct attack on German working capital on a massive scale.
And what was the justification? Was this money seized to go directly to the Reparation Commission?
No, and this is where the mechanism gets particularly cynical. This expropriation was first intended to settle private debts between Allied citizens and German citizens.
So private disputes.
Yes. Only the surplus, if there was any left over after those private debts were paid, would be transferred to the Reparation Commission. It basically used private German capital as a mandated slush fund to settle private liabilities.
So let me get this straight. If a German citizen owned a house in London, the British government could seize it, sell it, use the money to pay off some unrelated private debt that citizen might have had to a British person.
Right.
And only then, maybe, would the rest go toward the National Reparation Bill. It completely nationalized private financial relationships.
Precisely. And this is what Keynes found so appalling. He said this treatment of private property had no precedent in any peace treaty of recent history. He called it a dangerous and immoral blow to the security of private property everywhere.
It just erases the line between an individual citizen and the state.
It does. It says
Yeah.
that the private assets and rights of individuals are just tools of the state.
And the philosophical damage is almost as bad as the economic one. If winning a war gives you the right to seize the personal assets of private citizens of the defeated nation, what does that do to global commerce?
It injects massive instability and risk into the whole system. The whole world of finance relies on the sanctity of private ownership. By treating private wealth as an arm of state foreign policy, the Allies introduced profound political risks into all international investment.
Keynes warned this would set a terrible precedent.
A cascading one, making capital flight and market instability far more likely anytime international tensions rise in the future.
It's hard to imagine a more comprehensive plan to cripple a modern state. You destroy their territorial base, take their resources, steal their transport, and then strip their citizens of private capital globally.
And even after all that, they still weren't done. The treaty then introduced new mechanisms to actively shackle Germany's ability to rebuild its trade and create new wealth.
Which makes the subsequent payment demands even more fantastical. Let's get into that, the trade and tariff shackles.
These clauses were, you could say, masterpieces of commercial subservience. The main tool was forcing Germany to grant all the Allied states most favored nation treatment for 5 years.
Which means the Allies automatically get the lowest tariffs and the best trading conditions Germany offers to anyone.
Yes. But the crippling detail, the thing that makes it so unfair, is that it was non-reciprocal. Germany was not entitled to get the same treatment in return.
Of course not. So German exporters were at a huge, immediate disadvantage.
A massive one. The Allies could keep their high tariffs against German goods, blocking them out of foreign markets, while German ports were forced open to Allied imports at the lowest possible rates. It was a one-way street designed to strangle German exports.
The very exports they needed to generate the currency to pay reparations.
The very engine. While at the same time, it exposed what was left of German industry to overwhelming Allied competition at home.
There was also a strange restriction right at the beginning. Germany was prevented from imposing any duties on imports for the first 6 months. Why was that 6-month window so damaging?
It was profoundly injurious. In a post-war economy that's desperate for stability, the ability to control your imports is absolutely vital.
You have to conserve what little you have.
Exactly. By prohibiting Germany from imposing duties, the Allies stopped them from conserving their limited foreign exchange. Germany couldn't protect its new, fragile industries. It couldn't prioritize importing essential food over luxury goods. It just drained their precious currency reserves right when they needed them most.
And on top of the trade restrictions, the treaty interfered with their domestic logistics, their transport system.
Yes, the clauses about railways, again, they were non-reciprocal. The rules about rail freight, and especially the confiscation of rolling stock, just compounded the chaos of Germany's transport system.
So if Allied goods get priority and cheaper rates on German railways, while those same railways are struggling with far fewer trains and carriages.
The efficiency of the entire German industrial machine is further compromised. It makes it harder to move coal from a mine to a factory, or to move finished goods from a factory to a port for export.
It just guarantees inefficiency and disorder.
And every one of these causes, the coal, the shipping, the trade rules, they all reinforce the central destructive argument of Chapter 4.
Which brings us to the core thesis. We've detailed the systematic destruction of the German engine. This leads to the central argument, the incompatibility of punishment and payment.
The conclusion is it's just inescapable. Keynes argues that the treaty stripped Germany of the very things that made mass reparation even theoretically possible.
Pre-war Germany relied on global trade to support 15 million people.
Right. So by removing the engine, the coal, the iron, the shipping, the foreign investments, and then at the same time demanding the fuel, these massive currency payments, the Allies created what Keynes calls the paradox of poverty.
You demand vast wealth while actively ensuring the debtor can never create it. So what did Keynes predict would be the inevitable outcome of this policy?
Inevitable collapse. He argued that the destruction of German industry and trade meant Germany wouldn't be able to sustain its own population. It wouldn't be in a position to give bread to the millions of people who are now prevented from earning their livelihood.
This sounds like he's predicting a massive societal breakdown, not just an economic depression.
It becomes a material impossibility to maintain the population. Germany's ability to import food was crippled, and at the same time, its ability to pay the demands was also crippled. He warned that a huge part of German industry would just be destroyed, leading to depression and potentially mass emigration.
A truly bleak forecast.
Yeah.
And was this driven just by rage, or was there real economic illiteracy among the leaders in Paris?
It was a mixture of both, and tragically, it was weighted heavily towards the former. The leaders were so preoccupied with their own national and political gains, they completely failed to grasp the fundamental problem of a Europe that was, as a whole, starving and disintegrating.
They weren't trying to heal wounds.
They weren't. They were so intent on revenge that the demands of the treaty were based on technical impossibility. They confused vengeance with the capacity to pay.
This takes us to the ultimate condemnation of the treaty's financial mechanism. I want to focus on Keynes's dramatic language, that chilling metaphor he uses to describe the power of the Reparation Commission.
It's probably the most famous and certainly the most dramatic line in the entire book. He describes the power given to the Commission, this authority to continuously extract the maximum obtainable sum from Germany year after year.
It left Germany with no incentive.
No incentive, no enterprise, no hope. And this continuous extraction, he says, is a policy that skins her alive year by year in perpetuity.
Skins her alive? That is visceral. It's a shocking language for an economist. But what did he mean by that specifically?
He was describing a mechanism of financial terror. If you have a fixed high debt, you might still have some small incentive to be efficient, because once it's paid, you keep the surplus.
Right, there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
But the Reparation Commission's power meant there was no light. If Germany became more efficient, if its exports grew, if it showed any sign of recovery, the Commission could just step in and raise the payment.
So any effort by German industry or citizens to rebuild or save or invest would just be seized by the Allies.
Immediately, it destroys the fundamental economic incentive for enterprise. Why would you risk capital? Why innovate? Why work harder when any surplus you create is immediately confiscated? He said this policy, if deliberately practiced, is an outrageous act of a cruel victor.
It guarantees stagnation and resentment, a permanent state of economic siege.
In essence, Chapter 4 built the machine that converted any potential German prosperity into Allied claims, while simultaneously gutting Germany's capacity to actually create the wealth to sustain those payments.
So it was financially and economically irrational. Looking just at the structural changes in Chapter 4, you have to conclude that Germany was incapable of paying, regardless of what the final bill was.
The default and the collapse were written into the treaty's economic DNA from the very beginning.
So the ultimate condemnation isn't just that the treaty was harsh. It's that it contradicted its own stated financial goals. It prioritized punitive destruction over a sustainable way to get paid.
It guaranteed a future of political instability financed by economic impossibility, and it guaranteed that the failure to heal the wounds of Europe would continue, leaving the continent starving and disintegrating. All because the leaders failed to see that a healthy creditor needs a healthy, stable debtor.
This deep dive into Chapter 4 has laid bare the architectural blueprint for economic disaster. We've analyzed the mechanisms, the territorial cession of coal and iron, the destruction of the merchant marine, and, most dangerously, the confiscation of private property that fundamentally crippled Germany's ability to produce and earn.
We have proven the structural impossibility of the treaty, confirming that the German economy was physically and legally incapable of paying gargantuan debts. But that leads us directly to the next unavoidable question. If the engine was destroyed, what size was the bill they expected the corps to pay? The punishment was cruel, but what was the actual number they demanded?
Join us for the next episode where we delve into the heart of the catastrophe, the quantitative and devastating analysis of Chapter 5, Reparation. We will examine the sheer scale of the financial demands and the incredible burdens placed upon Germany, far exceeding any reasonable capacity or sober calculation.
Before we close, let's leave you with this final thought for reflection. Keynes argued forcefully that the wholesale expropriation of private German property was an act that was highly unusual and dangerous, setting a negative international precedent. How quickly do international norms and the security of private ownership erode when victory yields absolute power? And what are the long-term global consequences when a nation treats the private wealth of its defeated adversary as an extension of state foreign policy? We will explore these financial costs next time.